Angel Reese just publicly compared herself to Michael Jordan in women's basketball, and she is reportedly furious about what the Chicago Sky revealed after trading her to the Atlanta Dream, the same Chicago Sky that moved her for 2 future late first-round picks and a second-round swap with 0 stars coming back and 0 cash attached. Fans immediately labeled it the bargain bin trade because the return felt like pocket change for a 2-time All-Star, so why would any organization dump a player of that profile for almost nothing in return? What Chicago admitted publicly about Reese's exit tells you everything about why she was already gone before the announcement was made, and Reese's reaction to all of it is something you genuinely need to hear. Welcome back to Only WNBA, where we never skip the uncomfortable parts of the story. Do you think Angel Reese in Atlanta can actually beat Caitlin Clark and the Indiana Fever this season? Drop your prediction in the comments right now and let us get into all of it.
The Chicago Sky trade Angel Reese for a bag of Skittles or a bag of Magic Beans or whatever. A bag of Skittles is what we got. That's what we got. That's what we got. We got a Skittles. We got a bag of Skittles.
The suspension is where Chicago stopped pretending everything was manageable, not the trade announcement, not the locker room leaks that had been circulating for months, not the drama that kept finding its way onto social media. The actual half-game suspension handed down in September after Reese sat down with the Chicago Tribune and told reporters the Sky needed to go get great players and called it non-negotiable for her. She was not raising this concern privately with the front office. She was not bringing it to a team meeting where it could be addressed internally. She went directly to the press and essentially told the organization they were not good enough for her standards. Chicago responded by benching her for half a game and officially stamping her comments with the label detrimental to the team. That label was not chosen casually, and it was not chosen quickly. That was an organization that had been building documentation for a long time, finally putting something official on paper. The relationship was already broken before that interview was ever published.
I find it odd that the Chicago Sky would jettison her after just 2 years. I think that speaks to what a headache she was in Chicago. Teammates didn't want to play with her. Coaches couldn't corral her. She was out there doing her double-double routine while the Chicago Sky were actually trying to win games or run an offense, and Angel Reese was just out there chasing stats.
That phrase detrimental to the team is not language organizations reach for lightly or casually. That is paper trail language. That is a front office creating a documented record of something they had been sitting with internally for months. You do not suspend your own all-star over a single quote unless the underlying relationship is already broken past any realistic point of repair, and the pattern started building long before September arrived. When Courtney Vanderloot went down with an injury, Reese did not keep things quiet or say the right things publicly the way teammates typically do in those moments. She called Vanderloot old and publicly implied she was washed up. Players around the league noticed immediately because that is simply not how teammates speak about each other when cameras are present, let alone when they are not. Vanderloot had spent years building that organization's culture from the inside and earned genuine respect from players across the entire league. That comment landed poorly in every locker room that heard about it, and nobody forgot it.
We can't rely on Courtney to come back at that age that she's at, Reese said. I know she'll be a great asset for us, but we can't rely on that. We need someone probably a little younger with some experience, somebody who's been playing the game and is willing to compete for a championship and has done it before. Courtney Vandersloot, by the way, 2-time WNBA champion, 5-time All-Star, 2-time All-WNBA first team, left the New York Liberty, a championship caliber team, to come help out the Chicago. Oh, damn. Oh, damn. Oh, dang. Oh, dang. It's all right, Courtney.
The Camila Cardoso situation is almost stranger than anything else in this entire story because of who Cardoso actually was in relation to Reese. Cardoso was not a rival. She was not a veteran with a different vision for the team. She was Reese's own front court partner, her day-to-day teammate, the person she shared the paint with every single game on the schedule. Multiple sources inside the building reported that Cardoso eventually walked away from Reese entirely. Her behavior toward younger players specifically was making the locker room environment feel genuinely unstable for the people trying to work in it every day. When your own front court partner reaches the point of walking away from you, that is not a personality difference or a chemistry issue that time and patience can resolve. That is something more fundamental and more persistent than a rough stretch between teammates.
About this Camila Cardoso last night is you seeing her visibly giving up on her team here. Look at this. Look at this. Camila Cardoso literally walking towards the New York Liberty bench. Walking towards the New York Liberty bench. Like, hey, Brianna, Sabrina, scoot over a little bit. Let me take a seat. Hey, Sandy, is there any room on the bench for me? Can you guys use an extra player? Can I switch jerseys and see how I fit on this team?
Think carefully about what it actually takes to drive away your own front court partner from your day-to-day relationship. That is not a personality clash. That is a documented pattern of behavior playing out consistently over time, and people inside Chicago's organization had been watching it long enough that multiple commentators noted there has never been a team, not Maryland, not LSU, not the Sky, where Reese did not eventually produce locker room friction of some kind. The flagrant foul situations involving Caitlin Clark followed the same pattern throughout 2024 and 2025. Every time the gap between what Reese said publicly and what the actual footage showed grew wider and more obvious to anyone watching the replays carefully. Then the 2025 season opener against Indiana arrived, and after drawing offsetting technical fouls with Clark, Reese framed the entire situation publicly as discrimination. Her own teammates were reportedly caught off guard by that pivot because nobody inside that locker room was expecting her to go there. That moment changed the atmosphere inside the building in ways that never fully recovered.
She going after her like she want to fight. Look at her. Angel Reese pulling the jersey up and everything. She's like, forget basketball. She cussing at her. Oh my gosh.
By the time the late season absences started accumulating and Reese began citing a back injury, Chicago's front office had already mentally completed the move in their heads. The timing was suspicious enough that reporters and fans both flagged it publicly because those absences lined up almost perfectly with the stretches when internal accountability conversations inside the building were getting loudest. And then she appeared on a private jet heading to Las Vegas, which did not exactly support the back injury narrative she had been presenting to the organization. Chicago did not move Reese because her rebounding numbers declined. She led the league in rebounds across both of her seasons with the Sky, and nobody is disputing that production. They moved her because the cost of managing her had grown larger than what she was producing on the court. Every headache, every locker room conversation, every press statement that needed damage control had a price attached to it. Atlanta just inherited every single piece of that situation, not a calmer or more mature version of Reese, the exact same one that Chicago needed to move as quickly as possible.
They traded her for a bag of Cheetos. They wanted to get rid of her so bad. Angel Reese, I see a lot of people from the Atlanta area chanting it on, oh Angel, welcome home, welcome home. I hope some of you keep it real about the disaster she played a part in causing in Chicago.
Atlanta's front court was already carrying real limitations before this trade was ever discussed. Brittany Griner and Brianna Jones were already consuming interior minutes on a roster that was not built for pace and perimeter spacing. Now Reese is walking through the door, and the paint is going to be crowded, heavy, and flat-footed against an Indiana Fever team that runs pace and space as well as anyone in the Eastern Conference. Griner still carries genuine post presence, and her name still means something in this league, but she is not a pick-and-roll defender capable of chasing Aaliyah Boston through screens on the perimeter. She cannot rotate quickly enough to contest corner threes, which is exactly the shot Indiana forces teams into when Clark is running the offense, and defenses have to choose between protecting the paint and closing out on shooters. Against Griner, specifically, that choice is already settled before the play even develops because her limitations in space are well documented. Clark does not just shoot, she moves the ball into actions that make slow bigs pay a price on every single possession.
The Atlanta Dream now look like a team on paper with Ryan Howard, with Alicia Gray, with Brittany Griner, and now the league's top rebounder added to their roster. Atlanta should, and I think they won. I think they went 30-14 last season. Atlanta should be a title contender, although I'm very suspicious because I think Angel Reese is a poison and a toxin that has been added to that locker room.
8 stacking Jones alongside Griner and Reese creates a front court where nobody on the roster can guard the perimeter consistently. That is a genuine and serious problem against Kelsey Mitchell and Sophie Cunningham, who both shoot comfortably off movement and do not need much daylight to get clean looks at the basket. You cannot sag off either of them without giving up open threes, but Atlanta's front court cannot chase them through screens either, so Indiana gets to pick its poison on every possession without facing any real defensive consequence for the choices it makes. Reese's shooting limitations have been a documented issue throughout her entire WNBA career. The offensive rebounding ability is athletically impressive and genuinely productive when it produces second chance points. But it does not change the reality that defenses do not respect her from mid-range or beyond the arc. Teams simply sag off her, pack the paint, and dare her to beat them from the outside. Against a defense already clogging the lane, that approach is a dead end. Atlanta's spacing problem compounds itself every single time Reese receives the ball on the perimeter, and the defense does not move an inch in response. That is the challenge sitting in front of this roster, and adding Reese did not solve it. It made it more complicated. And this is where the matchup really starts to tilt, because Indiana doesn't just rely on individual talent, they rely on system pressure that exposes exactly these kinds of weaknesses over and over again. When you have a team that can stretch the floor, move the ball quickly, and force defensive rotations on nearly every possession, any lack of mobility or hesitation becomes a liability that compounds throughout the game. Atlanta isn't just dealing with one slow defender in this scenario, they're dealing with an entire front court that struggles to adjust once the ball starts swinging side to side. That's where the problems multiply, because it's not just about guarding one action, it's about recovering from the second and third actions that come immediately after. Indiana thrives in those sequences. The first pass pulls the defense slightly out of position, the second forces a rotation, and by the third, someone is either open on the perimeter or cutting into space that shouldn't exist if the defense is connected. Against quicker, more agile teams, you can sometimes recover just enough to contest. Against a front court like Atlanta's current setup, those recovery windows shrink dramatically, and then you add Reese into that equation, and it becomes even more complicated. Not because she doesn't bring effort or energy, but because her strengths don't necessarily solve the problems Atlanta already has. She's another interior presence on a team that already had size, another rebounder on a team that already crashes the glass. But what Atlanta needed wasn't more of the same. They needed versatility, they needed spacing, they needed someone who could stretch the defense or switch onto perimeter players without becoming a target. Instead, what they now have is a lineup that risks becoming predictable. And in today's game, predictability is one of the fastest ways to fall behind. Defenses can pre-rotate. They can sag into the paint without fear. They can dare certain players to take shots they're not comfortable taking. And once that happens, the entire offensive rhythm starts to break down. Possessions become slower, decisions become rushed, and suddenly the game starts slipping away, not because of one big mistake, but because of dozens of small ones stacking on top of each other. That's why this trade isn't just about talent, it's about fit. And right now, the fit raises more questions than answers. Because if Atlanta can't adjust their spacing, can't speed up their defensive rotations, and can't find a way to balance their lineup, they're gonna run into the same issues night after night, especially against teams like Indiana that are built to exploit those exact gaps. And that brings everything full circle. Because the concerns Chicago had weren't just about personality or locker room dynamics, they were also about how everything translated onto the court when the stakes were highest. And now Atlanta has to figure out in real time whether they can solve those same problems or if they've simply inherited them.